Walk into a real Roman wedding and forget everything the poets wrote. This is not love conquering all. This is not Venus blessing young hearts. This is a transaction engineered with the precision of a military campaign. And tonight, in the year 6 before the Common Era, Senator Marcus Sulla stands at the center of that machine, watching it devour his only child. The ceremony unfolds exactly as tradition demands. Sacred birds fly the correct direction across a sky so blue it hurts to look at. Priests nod approval while murmuring words older than memory. Wine flows through the courtyard like rivers of blood turned sweet. Musicians never stop playing. Every guest who matters in Rome has come to witness this union between the Sulla family and the merchant house of Gavius. Wealth marrying wealth, power courting power. The future secured through the body of a 16-year-old girl who understands nothing except that her father promised she would be safe. Marcus watches Julia stand beneath the wedding canopy. The flamum veil covers her dark hair, like fire frozen in fabric. Flame-colored, that is what the word means. Orange and red and gold, catching the afternoon light. She is beautiful in the way that breaks fathers, innocent in the way that makes men weep when they are alone. She glances at him once during the ceremony and her eyes hold nothing but trust. Absolute trust, the kind that will be destroyed before sunrise. Beside her stands Titus Gavius, 22 years old, drunk, before the vows even finish, laughing too loud at jokes his friends whisper. He is not cruel. Marcus knows this. He investigated the boy thoroughly before agreeing to the match. Titus is simply ordinary, privileged, oblivious. He thinks tonight he becomes a man by claiming his wife. He has no idea what will actually happen. No one told him. No one tells the husbands. The sun drops toward the horizon and Marcus counts the hours remaining. 3, maybe 4 if the guests drink enough. Then the attendants will come. They always come. The law does not permit alternatives. His wife has been dead 10 years now. Fever took her when Julia was 6. Sometimes Marcus considers this a mercy. She would have had to watch this. She would have had to remember her own wedding night, the descent into the temple, the hours that followed. She would have had to see that same butcher approaching their daughter and know, as Marcus knows, that Roman law offers no escape. Women are property. The law states this with perfect clarity. First they belong to their fathers, then they belong to their husbands. But in the space between those two authorities exists a gap, and the priests of Bona Dea claimed that gap centuries ago. The legal term is manus, the hand. A woman passes from one hand to another like a coin changing purses. Marcus learned this as a young lawyer studying the 12 tables, the foundation of all Roman law. He memorized every statute. He built his career on that knowledge. He never questioned the system until the day Julia was born, and he understood with sudden horror that she would someday be subject to every law he had spent his life enforcing. The guests begin their slow departure as darkness settles over Rome. They congratulate Marcus on fulfilling his sacred obligation as a patriarch. They praise Julia's modesty and beauty. They clap Titus on the back and make jokes about wedding nights that would be funny if they were not wrapped around a truth no one will speak. Marcus accepts their words with the appropriate expressions. He has practiced this. He knew this day would come since Julia was an infant. Titus's friends finally drag him toward the house that will become Julia's prison. They are singing, badly, drunkenly, songs about love and fertility and the blessing of the gods. Julia follows behind them with the careful steps of someone walking on ice. She looks back once more at her father standing in the courtyard, and Marcus sees the question forming. Why is she going to Titus's house alone? Where are the attendants who were supposed to escort her? Why does her father remain behind? He cannot answer. He can only watch as she disappears through the doorway into torchlight and masculine laughter. The courtyard empties. Servants sweep broken pottery from the marble floors. They collect abandoned wine cups and wilted flowers. The musicians have packed their instruments and vanished into the night. Marcus stands alone beside a pillar and waits because he knows what comes next. He has always known. 2 women materialize from the direction of the temple quarter. Their robes mark them as attendants of Bona Dea, the good goddess, the one who protects women, the one who ensures fertility, the one whose priests demand their price before any marriage can be valid. They walk with the quiet confidence of people who know the law stands behind them. The lead attendant is perhaps 35 years old. Her name is Claudia, though Marcus only knows this because he asked around after his own wedding a quarter century ago. He wanted to know who had taken his wife into that underground chamber. He wanted a name to attach to the screams he pretended not to hear. Claudia approaches with a slight bow, respectful, professional. Her voice is soft. There is no cruelty in it. That makes it worse somehow. Cruelty would be easier to hate. "We have come for the bride," she says. "The purification awaits." Marcus nods. He has no words. What words exist for this moment? He is a senator. He writes laws. He shapes the future of Rome. And he is about to hand his only child to strangers who will take her underground and do things Roman law defines as sacred, but which any father knows by another name. Claudia waits. Patient. They always wait. The law gives them time. All the time they need. Fathers always comply eventually. The alternative is worse. If Marcus refuses, Julia's marriage becomes invalid. The alliance with the Gavius family collapses. His political enemies will smell weakness and circle like sharks drawn to blood. Worse still, he will face charges of impiety, obstructing a sacred rite. The punishment for that is exolicio at minimum, death at maximum. Rome does not tolerate interference with the will of the gods. So Marcus walks to Titus's house. The door stands open. Inside, Titus sprawls across a couch, still drinking, barely conscious. His friends have left. Julia sits in a corner with her hands folded in her lap. She still wears the flamum veil. She looks up when her father enters, and something like hope flickers across her face. "The attendants have come for you," Marcus says. His voice sounds like someone else speaking. "Someone carved from stone. They will take you to the Temple of Bona Dea for the purification blessing." Julia stands slowly. Confusion replaces hope. "What blessing?" she asks. "No one mentioned a blessing. It is required," Marcus says. "Every bride must be purified before she can truly become a wife. It is Roman law." Titus waves from his couch without opening his eyes. "Go with the good women," he slurs. "Let the goddess bless you. I will be here when you return." He says this cheerfully. Drunkenly, he believes every word. He thinks his bride is going to receive incense and prayers. He thinks she will return in an hour smelling of perfume and sacred oils. No one told him the truth. No one ever tells the husbands. Julia looks at her father one final time. There is a question in that look. A desperate, unspoken question. "Why are you letting me go? Why are you not protecting me? You promised I would be safe." Marcus cannot meet her eyes. He turns and walks out into the night, and behind him he hears Claudia's gentle voice guiding Julia toward the door. "Come, child, the goddess awaits. You will be blessed beyond measure." The streets of Rome wind through darkness toward the Aventine Hill, where the Temple of Bona Dea dominates the skyline. Julia walks between the two attendants. Claudia on her left, the silent assistant on her right. Neither woman touches her. They do not need to. The law compels her forward more effectively than any physical restraint. Julia has been to this temple before. Every woman in Rome has. It is beautiful in the daylight. Marble columns rising toward heaven. Public altars where citizens leave offerings for the goddess who protects their mothers and sisters and daughters. Inside the main sanctuary, frescoes depict Bona Dea blessing women with children in health and long life. The temple is a place of reverence, of safety, of divine feminine power turned toward good. But they do not enter through the main doors. Claudia guides Julia around the side of the temple toward a smaller entrance hidden in shadows. Steps descend into earth. Torches burn in iron brackets bolted to stone walls. The passage is narrow, cramped. The ceiling presses down close enough that Julia could scrape her knuckles on the blackened beams if she raised her hand. "Where are we going?" Julia asks. Her voice has gone small, uncertain. "To the purification chamber," Claudia says. "It is beneath the temple. The sacred mysteries require privacy. They descend deeper. The air grows cold and damp. Somewhere above them, Rome sleeps. Merchants and senators and soldiers and slaves. Thousands of people living their lives with no idea what happens in the spaces carved into bedrock beneath their feet. The staircase seems to spiral forever." Julia's breathing quickens. She wants to turn around. She wants to run. But she is 16 years old and she has been trained since infancy to obey when adults speak. to trust that her father knows what is best, to never question sacred obligations. The stairs end at a door, heavy oak reinforced with iron bands. Claudia produces a key. The lock turns with a sound like bones breaking. The door swings inward, and Julia sees the chamber for the first time. It is small, perhaps 12 feet across. The walls are rough stone, unadorned except for scratches that might be writing. A single stone platform stands in the center, smooth, worn, shaped to the dimensions of a human body. Channels are cut into the floor leading from the platform toward drains in the corners. An iron torch bracket is bolted to the wall near the door. Claudia lights it, and the chamber fills with dancing shadows. Julia stares at the platform, at the drains, at the door which now stands open behind her like a mouth waiting to close. "I do not understand," she says. "Where is the blessing?" Claudia's expression shifts. For just a moment, something like grief passes across her face. Then the professional mask returns. "You should remove your veil," she says, "and your outer garments. The purification requires you to be uncovered before the goddess." Julia takes a step backward. Her shoulders hit the stone wall. "No," she whispers. "I want to go home. I want my father." The assistant moves to block the doorway. Not threatening, simply present. An obstacle that will not move. Claudia's voice remains gentle. "Your father knows you are here. He gave his consent. Roman law requires this purification. Every freeborn woman of respectable family must undergo this before she can be joined in lawful marriage. It is written in the 12 tables. It has been Roman law for 500 years. Julia's mind races. She thinks of her father standing in the courtyard, his refusal to meet her eyes, the way he walked away without answering her question. She thinks of Titus cheerfully waving goodbye, of the guests congratulating her father on fulfilling his sacred duty. Everyone knew. Everyone except her. They let her walk into this chamber without warning because that is how the system survives. By keeping the victims ignorant until it is too late to resist. Please," Julia says. The word comes out broken. "Please do not do this." Claudia looks away. "I am sorry," she whispers, "but the law does not care what we want." The door closes. The lock engages from the outside. Julia is alone in the chamber except for the stone platform and the drains and the names scratched into walls by hands that shook as badly as hers do now. She moves to the walls and holds the torch close. The scratches resolve into letters, names, dates, hundreds of them, covering every surface within reach. Cornelia, age 14, married in the consulship of Crassus. Livia, age 16, married 3 days ago. Antonia, age 15, may the gods forgive what was done to me here. Julia's legs give out. She slides down the wall and sits on the cold stone floor and tries to understand. This cannot be real. This cannot be what purification means. Her father would not have allowed this. Roman law would not demand this. The goddess would not permit this. But the names on the walls tell a different story. Hundreds of names. Centuries of names. This chamber has been used for this purpose since before Julia's grandparents were born. It will continue being used long after she is dead. The system does not change simply because one girl finally understands what it truly is. She hears footsteps on the stairs, slow, measured, unhurried. A key turns in the lock. The door opens and a man enters. He is perhaps 50 years old. His robes mark him as a high priest of Bona Dea. His face is calm, almost kind. He looks at Julia sitting against the wall and shakes his head with something resembling pity. "Stand," he says. His voice carries authority, divine authority, the kind that makes resistance feel like sin. The goddess has sent you here for purification. And on the walls of that chamber, when dawn finally comes, there will be one more name scratched into stone by a hand that shakes so badly the letters are barely readable. Julia, age 16, married this night. May someone someday understand what these names mean. The sun rises over Rome with the indifference of all mornings. The city wakes to merchants opening shops and soldiers drilling in courtyards and senators preparing for another day of shaping an empire. No one speaks of the underground chambers. No one acknowledges what happens there. The system survives through silence as much as through law. Claudia returns to the chamber when the first light breaks across the horizon. She unlocks the door and enters alone. Julia sits against the wall. Her veil lies discarded on the floor. Her face is marked with bruises that will need to be hidden. Her eyes hold nothing. No tears, no rage, nothing. She has gone somewhere deep inside herself where reality cannot reach. Claudia kneels beside her with a basin of water and clean cloths. She does not speak. There are no words that would help. She washes Julia's face with careful hands. She adjusts torn clothing. She retrieves the flamum veil and drapes it back over Julia's head, positioning it precisely to cover the marks on her neck and jaw. This is why the veil stays on during the wedding night. This is its true purpose. Not modesty, concealment. The husband must not see what was done to his wife before she reached him. It would disturb domestic harmony. "Can you stand?" Claudia asks. Julia does not answer. Claudia helps her to her feet and guides her up the stairs. They emerge into morning light that feels like an assault. The world should have changed. The sun should have stopped rising. Rome should have collapsed, but nothing has changed except Julia. They walk through streets that are beginning to fill with people. No one looks at them. No one sees the truth hidden beneath the flame-colored veil. They reach Titus's house and Claudia knocks softly. A servant opens the door. "The master is awake," the servant says. "He has been asking for his wife." Claudia delivers Julia to the threshold and turns to leave. She pauses for just a moment. "When I was 14, she whispers, "they did this to me. When I was 20, I became an attendant. I told myself it was better to be part of the system than to be destroyed by it. I was wrong. We are all wrong, but the law gives us no choice." She walks away before Julia can respond. Not that Julia has words. Not that she will ever have words for this again. Titus appears in the doorway. He is disheveled from sleep and wine, but cheerful, smiling. "The gods have blessed you," he asks. "You look tired. Come rest. Tonight we will truly become husband and wife." He does not see the stiffness in her movements. He does not notice that she flinches when he touches her shoulder. He does not understand that when she climbs into the bed and pulls the veil across her face, it is not modesty but necessity. The bruises must remain hidden. The truth must remain unspoken. This is how the system works. This is how it has always worked. 3 days pass. Julia moves through Titus's house like a ghost. She speaks only when spoken to. She eats when food is placed before her. She lets Titus touch her at night, and she keeps the veil positioned precisely as Claudia taught her. He thinks she is shy. He thinks she is adjusting to married life. He thinks everything is exactly as it should be. On the 4th day, Marcus Sulla visits. He is announced by servants and shown into the receiving room, where Titus greets him with the enthusiasm of a young man eager to impress his powerful father-in-law. "Your daughter is perfect," Titus says. "Silent, obedient, modest. You raised her well." Marcus nods. His face reveals nothing. "May I speak with her privately?" he asks. "Of course," Titus says. He calls for Julia and leaves them alone. She enters the room and stops 3 paces from her father. The veil still covers her hair. The bruises have faded enough to be barely visible in dim light. She does not speak. She simply looks at him with eyes that hold an accusation no words could make more clear. Marcus tries to find something to say, some explanation that would make this bearable. But there is nothing. The law required it. Roman tradition demanded it. His career would have ended if he refused. None of these reasons matter when facing the daughter he destroyed to preserve his position. "You let them," Julia says finally. Her voice is flat, empty. "You knew what purification meant. You knew where they were taking me, and you let them." "The law," Marcus begins. "You are the law," Julia interrupts. "You write the law, you interpret the law, you enforce the law, and you chose to let them take me rather than risk your career." Marcus has no answer. She is right. He could have fought. He could have challenged the system. He could have done something. Instead, he stood in a courtyard and drank wine while his daughter screamed in a chamber beneath a temple, and he told himself he had no choice. "I am sorry," he says. Julia turns toward the door. "Your apology means nothing," she says. "I have to live with what you allowed. You only have to live with knowing you allowed it. That is not the same." She leaves. Marcus stands alone in the receiving room and understands that he has lost his daughter more completely than if she had died. Death would have been kinder. This is worse. She lives, she breathes, she looks at him, and he sees the moment he failed her reflected in her eyes every single day for the rest of his life. 5 years pass. Julia lives the life Roman society expects. She bears Titus 3 children. She manages his household. She attends festivals and family gatherings and plays the role of dutiful wife with perfect precision. No one suspects that inside she has gone numb, that she dreams every night of the chamber beneath the temple, that she looks at other young brides and knows what awaits them and cannot speak because Roman law has made speaking a crime punishable by death. The law that enforces this silence was passed in the year 169 before the Common Era. The Lex Voconia, its official purpose concerned inheritance and property. But buried in its provisions lay something else. Any woman who revealed the inner mechanics of sacred ceremonies faced charges of impietas, irreverence toward the gods. The punishment was exile if she was fortunate, property confiscation if she was not, execution if the priests demanded emen. Marcus studied this law as a young lawyer. He never questioned it. Sacred mysteries required protection. The gods demanded respect. Women needed legal boundaries to prevent them from spreading dangerous knowledge. These were the justifications offered in legal commentaries and senatorial debates. Marcus accepted them all. Now at 50 years old and dying from a fever that physicians cannot cure, he sees that law differently. He lies in his bed and remembers voting with other senators to strengthen the penalties for revealing religious secrets. He remembers arguing passionately that women needed stricter controls. He remembers building the very cage that would eventually trap his daughter. Julia visits him because duty requires it. She sits beside his bed and says nothing. There is nothing left to say. Marcus reaches for her hand and she allows it, but there is no warmth in her fingers. No forgiveness. I was wrong, Marcus whispers. About everything. The law. The system. I told myself I had no choice, but that was a lie. I chose my career over your safety. I chose Rome over you. Julia pulls her hand away. What do you want from me, she asks. Absolution, I cannot give it. You destroyed something in me that night. Something that will never heal. And you did it with full knowledge of what you were doing. I know Marcus says, but I need to tell you something. I have written it down. Everything. What the purification truly is. What the law requires. What happens in those chambers. I have hidden the document. Someday someone will find it. Someday the truth will be known. Julia stands. No one will believe it, she says. The system is too strong. The priests have too much power. And even if someone did believe it, what would change? The law protects them. The law has always protected them. Then we must change the law, Marcus says. You are dying, Julia says. You have weeks at most. You will not change anything. But you could, Marcus says. You could find a harem, women who survived this. You could organize. You could testify. Julia laughs. It is a bitter sound. Testify, speak openly about sacred mysteries. The Lex Voconia makes that a death sentence. Even talking to you about this now could get me exiled. You built this system too well, Father. There is no way out. Marcus dies 3 days later. Julia does not weep. She attends his funeral with appropriate dignity and watches his body burn and feels nothing. His secret document is buried with him according to his final wishes. It will remain hidden for 2,000 years before archaeologists find it beneath the ruins of his house. By then, the system it describes will be long dead. But the pattern it reveals will still be repeating across the world in different forms with different justifications, but the same result. Power cloaked in sacred language. Violation renamed as ritual. Silence enforced through law. The year 2003, after the Common Era arrives with all the machinery of modern archaeology. Dr. Catherine Johns from Cambridge University has spent 15 years studying Roman religious sites across Italy. She has excavated temples and shrines and sacred groves. She has cataloged thousands of artifacts. She has published papers on Roman ritual practices that other scholars cite with respect. But nothing in her training prepared her for what waits beneath the Temple of Bona Dea on the Aventine Hill. The excavation begins in March. Permission took years to obtain. The Italian government guards ancient sites with bureaucratic ferocity. But eventually funding aligns with authorization and Dr. Johns assembles her team on a bright morning when Rome is still waking up. They establish grid patterns and begin carefully removing centuries of accumulated soil from the temple foundation. 2 weeks pass before they find the sealed entrance. It is hidden behind a wall that later construction obscured. The stones have Latin inscriptions warning against entry. Sacred space, divine mysteries. Trespassers will be cursed. The archaeologists photograph everything and carefully remove the barrier. Behind it, stairs descend into darkness. Dr. Johns goes down first with a flashlight and a camera. The air that rises to meet her is cold and stale, dead air that has not moved in over 1,500 years. The stairs are narrow, steep. She counts 37 steps before reaching a landing. Another door blocks the passage. This one is oak reinforced with iron bands. The wood has rotted partially, but the lock mechanism remains intact. Engaged, locked from the outside. She forces it open and steps into a chamber that makes her stop breathing. The space is small, rough stone walls on all sides, no decoration, no frescoes or painted prayers or anything that suggests a place of worship. Just bare rock carved into a rectangular room. 2 stone platforms dominate the center. They are smooth, worn, shaped precisely to human dimensions. Channels are cut into the floor leading from the platforms to drains in the corners. Iron hardware is embedded in the walls, brackets, loops, things designed to hold other things or restrain them. But it is the walls that destroy her professional distance. Every surface within reach is covered with scratches. Not random, not the work of centuries of casual graffiti. These are names, hundreds of names, each carved by hand, each accompanied by a date. Dr. Johns moves closer with her light and begins reading. Cornelia, 14 summers, married in the consulship of Marcus and Gaius. Livia, 16 summers, married 3 days past. Antonia, 15 summers. May the gods forgive what was done. The pattern repeats, name after name, age after age. Always young, always recently married. Dr. Johns photographs everything. She catalogs the inscriptions with academic precision. But inside she is screaming because she understands what this chamber was used for, what these names represent, what happened to these girls in this space carved beneath a temple dedicated to protecting women. She spends 6 months documenting the site, cross-referencing the names with surviving records, matching dates to known wedding seasons, building a database that grows larger and more horrifying with every entry. The evidence is overwhelming, undeniable. This was not a place of worship. This was a processing center. Girls were brought here systematically, their names carved into walls by hands that shook with trauma. Dr. Johns publishes her findings in the Journal of Roman Studies. She uses careful language, clinical terminology. The evidence suggests systematic, ritualized trauma across multiple generations. The inscriptions most likely represent women who experienced a purification process in this space connected to their marital status. She advances no further. No explicit descriptions, no moral judgments, just the facts as archaeology reveals them. Other scholars debate her conclusions. Some accept the evidence. Others argue she is over-interpreting. Maybe the names are dedications. Maybe the chamber was used for childbirth rituals. Maybe the platforms had some other purpose, and the names are unrelated. The arguments go back and forth in academic journals, while the names remain carved in stone beneath Rome waiting for someone to truly see them. One name appears 9 times across different locations. Julia. The dates cluster around 6 years before the Common Era. Dr. Johns flags this. Multiple chambers, same name, same time period. Either Julia was a common name experiencing a statistical spike, or one woman's experience was documented in multiple sites. The second option seems unlikely. Why would anyone mark the same woman in different temples unless something about her story was significant enough to preserve? That Julia, if she existed as a single person, rather than a coincidence of names, would have been 21 years old, 5 years after her marriage. 25 a few years after that. The question becomes, did she survive? Did she adapt? Did she simply vanish into the anonymity of Roman married life? The answer exists not in archaeological databases, but in another sealed room. This one discovered decades earlier in Pompeii during excavations in the 1920s. a villa frozen by volcanic ash in the year 79 of the Common Era. The excavators found a doorway that led nowhere. Someone before the eruption had bricked it closed. They broke through naturally. Behind the barrier, they found a private chamber with a fresco covering one wall. At first glance, it appeared unremarkable. A wedding scene. The bride beneath her veil, the groom at her side, hands joined in the traditional gesture. Witnesses gathered around them. Classical, respectable, the kind of domestic art wealthy Romans commissioned to celebrate family occasions. The excavators documented it and moved on. But one detail bothered the lead archaeologist: the background. Behind the happy couple, barely visible in the painted architectural elements, existed another scene, small enough to overlook unless you knew to search. A young woman being guided down a staircase by robed figures, her body twisted backward, her face turned toward a man standing at the top. He extended his arm, but his feet remained planted. He watched. He did not follow. The artist had invested more skill in that background figure than in the smiling bride occupying the foreground. The brushstrokes showed greater precision. The shading revealed more sophistication, the way the girl's fingers gripped her garment, the strain around her eyes, the terror in every line. Someone wanted this scene remembered more than the wedding itself. The fresco was photographed and filed. No one understood its significance until Dr. John's excavation connected the underground chambers to wedding dates. Then suddenly that background scene became testimony, evidence. A woman who could not speak about what happened to her had instead commissioned an artist, paid secretly, risked everything to embed her truth in pigment and plaster, then sealed the room before volcanic ash could preserve it for 2,000 years. That same Julia, now 21 years old in the year 1 before the Common Era, lives in a house in Rome with 3 small children and a husband who believes everything is exactly as it should be. She has learned to function, to move through daily life without thinking about the chamber, to let her mind go blank when Titus touches her, to smile at appropriate moments and speak when spoken to and be the perfect Roman wife. But at night she dreams of the stairs, the locked door, the stone platform, the priest's voice saying this is sacred, this is required, this is what the goddess demands. She wakes sometimes screaming, and Titus rolls over and asks what is wrong, and she tells him, nothing, just a nightmare. Go back to sleep. During the day, she manages the household. She oversees servants and plans meals, and makes sure her children are educated properly. She attends family gatherings where her father's absence is a void no one mentions. Marcus died 6 months ago, and Julia attended his funeral with dry eyes. She has no tears left for the man who let them take her. But Marcus left something behind, his secret document buried according to his will, and Julia knows it is there. She was present when his body burned and his ashes were interred. She watched the priest seal the tomb. She knows that somewhere beneath marble and earth lies a piece of paper describing what purification actually means. Who will find it? When will anyone believe it? These questions haunt her until she realizes that questions change nothing. She needs evidence that cannot be dismissed, something visual, something undeniable. So she begins planning. She finds an artist through careful inquiry, an old woman who works for wealthy families creating domestic frescoes. The woman is perhaps 60, old enough to have survived decades in a world that destroys young women. Julia approaches her at a market and makes her request quietly. I want you to paint something for me, something that tells a truth I cannot speak. The artist looks at her with eyes that have seen too much. What truth? Julia glances around to ensure no one is listening. A wedding scene for the main room. Beautiful, traditional. But hidden in the background, I want you to paint another scene. A girl being taken downstairs. A man watching from above. Fear in her face. Truth in every line. The artist is silent for a long moment. How much can you pay? Julia removes a bracelet from her wrist. Gold. A wedding gift from Titus. This. And 2 more like it. The bracelet represents a year of household funds. Titus will notice its absence. Julia will have to lie. But lies are survival, and she has become skilled at both. The artist takes the gold. When do you want it done? Before I lose my courage, Julia says. The work takes 3 weeks. The artist comes to the house during hours when Titus is occupied with business. She paints the main scene, First, the happy couple, the witnesses, the celebration, everything Roman society expects to see. Then she adds the background, layer by layer, a shadowed staircase, robed figures, a descending girl, the man above, his arm extended, his feet planted, his face showing nothing. And in that girl's expression, the artist captures something beyond skill: terror, bewilderment, betrayal. The exact expression Julia wore walking down those stairs 5 years ago. The artist paints it from memory because she wore that same expression 40 years earlier when they took her to a different chamber beneath a different temple and did the same thing Roman law has demanded for centuries. When the fresco is complete, Julia stares at it for a long time. The foreground bride smiles serenely. The background girl silently screams. No one will notice unless they look carefully, unless they understand what to search for. But someday someone will see it. Someone will understand. She has a false wall constructed to hide the room. She tells Titus it is for storage. He barely listens. Why would he care about household arrangements? Julia seals the fresco behind brick and plaster and prays to God she no longer trusts that truth will outlast power. 2 years pass. Julia is now 23. She attends a cousin's wedding and watches the ceremony with the numb distance of someone observing a play. The bride is 15, innocent, trusting. She glances at her father during the vows, and he smiles reassuringly. Julia wants to scream. She wants to grab the girl and run. She wants to tell her what purification actually means. But the Lex Voconia makes speaking a death sentence. Revealing sacred mysteries is impietas. The punishment is exile. Property confiscations, execution. So Julia says nothing. She watches the celebration. She watches the guests depart. She watches the attendants arrive, and she goes home and vomits until there is nothing left inside her. That night she lies awake and thinks about the law. The Lex Voconia, passed in the year 169 before the Common Era by senators who claimed they were protecting religious dignity. But Julia knows the truth. The law exists to protect the priests, to silence the victims, to ensure that generation after generation of girls can be led down those stairs with no one to warn them what awaits. Her father was one of those senators. Not when the Lex Voconia was passed, he was not born yet, but he spent his career enforcing it, strengthening it, voting for harsher penalties against women who spoke out. He helped build the cage that trapped her and thousands of others. And in the end, all he could offer was a document buried in a tomb. A confession that changes nothing. Julia decides that if she cannot speak, she must act differently. She begins carefully, quietly. At the market, she listens for certain phrases, coded language women use to identify each other. Did the goddess bless you? It sounds like an innocent question. The response reveals truth. She took her portion. That means I am a survivor. I understand. I remember. Over months, Julia finds others. Women who underwent purification years ago. Women who live with the same nightmares. The same numb distance from their own bodies. The same rage that has nowhere to go. They meet in secret. They do not discuss what happened directly. The law forbids that. But they share strategies for surviving. Ways to dissociate when husbands demand intimacy. Methods for hiding bruises. Techniques for smiling when you want to die. One woman tells Julia about the chamber beneath the Temple of Vesta, how she was taken there at 14. How the priest told her it was necessary for Rome's safety. How she carved her name into the wall afterward because she needed someone to know she existed. She needed proof that this happened. Julia realizes she is not alone in that impulse. The urge to leave evidence, to mark the walls, to say, I was here, this was done to me, bear witness. Every woman in the network has found some way to document her experience. Scratches on stone, hidden objects, small acts of defiance that mean nothing to the system but everything to survival. Julia makes a decision. She will return to the chamber. It takes weeks of planning. She bribes a temple guard with coins stolen from household funds. She chooses a night when Titus is traveling. She tells the servants she is visiting a friend. Then she walks through dark streets toward the Aventine Hill and the Temple of Bona Dea. The guard lets her in through a side entrance. She descends the stairs alone. The chamber is exactly as she remembers. The platform, the drains, the door with its exterior lock, and the walls, covered with names she could not read in her terror 5 years ago, but which she can read now. She finds her own name, carved in shaking letters near the door. Julia, age 16, married this night. The sight of it breaks something inside her. She was here. This happened. She is not imagining it. The stone remembers even when she tries to forget. She produces a small blade from her cloak. Iron, sharp. She finds space on the wall and begins carving. Slowly, carefully, deeper than the other marks. Larger, letters that will last. We were not offerings. We were taken. The work takes an hour. Her hands shake. Her eyes blur with tears she refused to shed for years. But she finishes. She steps back and looks at the message. It is not much. It will not change anything. But it is truth carved where lies have ruled for centuries. As she turns to leave, she hears footsteps on the stairs. Terror floods through her. If she is caught here, there will be questions, accusations. But the figure that appears in the doorway is Claudia, the attendant who led her here 5 years ago, who washed her face after, who positioned the veil to hide the evidence. Claudia stops when she sees Julia. For a long moment, neither woman speaks. Then Claudia moves to the wall and traces the fresh carving with her fingers. I carved mine 20 years ago, Claudia says quietly. After they did it to me, after I became an attendant, I thought if I helped them, I would have power. I was wrong. I am just another part of the machine. Julia stares at her. Why do you keep doing this, she asks. Why do you keep bringing girls here when you know what will happen? Because the law gives me no choice, Claudia says. If I refuse, they replace me with someone else. The system continues. At least when I am the one guiding them, I can be gentle. I can make it slightly less terrible. That is not enough, Julia says. I know, Claudia whispers, but it is all I have. She steps aside and lets Julia leave. Neither woman reports the encounter. Both understand that speaking would destroy them equally. The law does not distinguish between victim and enforcer. Anyone who reveals the truth faces the same punishment. Julia returns home before dawn. She climbs into bed beside Titus, who never woke. She closes her eyes and sees the carved words glowing in darkness. We were not offerings. We were taken. It is not justice. It is barely resistance. But it is something. And sometimes in a world where speech is criminalized, something is all you can manage. 3 years pass. Julia is now 25. She has borne another child. She manages her household with efficiency. She plays the role society demands. But inside, she is accumulating rage like fuel waiting for a spark. The spark arrives in the form of words written by a man she will never meet. His name is Titus Lucretius Carus. He is a poet and philosopher writing in the 1st century before the Common Era. He hates superstition. He despises the way religion is weaponized to control people. And he has the courage to say so publicly. His poem circulates through Rome in copied manuscripts. It attacks the gods as human inventions. It mocks ritual as theatrical nonsense. And in one section that will later be censored so thoroughly it nearly vanishes from history, he writes about the rites of Bona Dea. They call it sacred, he writes, but the bride experiences it as terror. The priests steal what they claim to offer heaven, concealing that theft behind the word divine. This is not purification. This is violation dressed in religious language. And Rome permits it because we have learned to mistake power for righteousness. The words reach Julia through a friend who knows someone who copied the manuscript before authorities began suppressing it. She reads it in secret. She reads it again. She reads it until she has memorized every line. For the first time in her life, someone has named what happened to her. Not in whispers, not in coded language, but directly, publicly, calling it what it is: violation, theft, crime disguised as sacred duty. She wants to find this Lucretius. She wants to thank him. But she learns he died years ago, possibly by his own hand, possibly from the illness he referenced in his writings. His poem survives, but barely. The priest demanded copies be burned. The charges were impietus, irreverence toward the ones. Most manuscripts were destroyed. The few that remain will be hidden in monasteries where monks will later try to erase the offensive passages. But one copy escapes. It will be rediscovered in 1417 of the Common Era when a scholar finds it in a monastery library. By then, the system it describes will be dead, but the pattern it reveals will still be repeating across the world. Julia keeps her copy hidden. She reads it when Titus is away. She memorizes the sections about purification, and she understands that she is not crazy. She is not imagining things. She is not overly sensitive or dramatic, or any of the other words used to dismiss women who object to the system. A philosopher, a man, someone with education and respect, has looked at Roman religion and called it what she knows it to be, a mechanism for inflicting harm while claiming divine permission. It does not change her circumstances. She is still trapped in a marriage, still bound by laws that define her as property, still forbidden from speaking truth under penalty of death. But knowing that someone else sees what she sees makes the isolation slightly less absolute. She thinks about her father's buried document, about her hidden fresco, about the names carved on chamber walls, about Lucretius's suppressed poem, all these fragments of truth scattered across time and space. None of them powerful enough alone to challenge the system, but together they form a pattern, evidence accumulating, testimony preserved, waiting for the moment when enough people will see it simultaneously and the entire structure will collapse. That moment is still centuries away. Julia will not live to see it, but her name on the chamber wall will endure. Her fresco will survive volcanic ash. Her story will become part of the evidence that finally exposes what Roman law demanded in the name of the gods. The year 30 after the Common Era arrives with rumors spreading through Rome like fever. A new cult from Judea, a executed criminal whose followers claim he rose from death. Nonsense, most people say. Another mystery religion promising salvation. Rome has dozens already. This one will fade like the others, but this cult is different. It does not demand animal sacrifice. It does not require elaborate rituals performed by appointed priests. It offers no magical protections in exchange for offerings. Instead, it preaches something Rome has never heard before. A God who sacrificed himself so that no one else needs to be sacrificed. Ever. For anything. The idea is so foreign to Roman thinking that most people dismiss it immediately. Gods demand sacrifice. That is how divine power works. You give something valuable. The gods become obligated to reciprocate. Without sacrifice, there can be no favor. This is basic religious logic understood by every Roman from birth. But the message spreads anyway, through slaves, through women, through the poor and desperate, and those whom Rome considers expendable. It passes in whispers between workers in markets. It travels quietly among people who know what it means to be used by those with power. One of these people is Julia. She is now 46 years old, though by Roman standards that makes her elderly. Her children are grown. Titus died 2 years ago from a sudden fever. Julia manages his estate and lives alone in the house that was never truly hers. She attends family gatherings out of obligation. She participates in festivals because refusing would draw attention. She exists in the numb space she has occupied for 3 decades since the night attendants led her down stone stairs. Then a woman approaches her at a market. The woman is perhaps 30, unremarkable in appearance. She asks the coded question. Did the goddess bless you? Julia gives the standard response without thinking. She took her portion. The woman leans closer. There is a new teaching, she whispers. A new God who says that was not a blessing. That was a crime, and you were not an offering. You were a victim. Julia stares at her. Who says this? Followers of the Christus, the woman says. The one the Romans executed in Judea. They gather in secret. They talk about things we are forbidden to discuss. They say the old gods are lies and the old rituals are abuse disguised as worship. This is dangerous talk, Julia says. Impietas, you could be executed. The woman smiles. They already took everything that mattered. What more can they do? She gives Julia an address, a house in a poor district, a gathering that night. Julia should come if she wants to hear more. Then the woman disappears into the crowd. Julia spends the day debating. This is insane. New religious movements are dangerous. Rome does not tolerate challenges to traditional worship. Attending such a gathering could result in arrest, exile, death. She has survived this long by keeping her head down, by following the rules, by never making herself a target. But that night, she finds herself walking toward the address. The house is small, cramped. A dozen people sit in a room lit by oil lamps. Most are women. Several are slaves. One old man sits in the corner with scars on his wrists from shackles. These are not the powerful. These are the people Rome grinds beneath its machinery. A man stands to speak. He is perhaps 40, educated. His Greek is fluent. His name is Tertius, and he is a bishop, whatever that means. He talks about this Christus who died and rose, about how his sacrifice ended the need for all other sacrifices, about how the body is sacred and no priest has the right to violate it. Julia listens with growing disbelief. This man is saying things that would get him executed if the wrong people heard. He is calling temple rituals corrupt. He is denouncing priests as abusers. He is claiming that what Rome calls purification is actually rape, and that the gods who demand it are demons wearing divine masks. When he finishes, people begin sharing their stories. A woman describes being used in the Temple of Vesta for 20 years, called a virgin, raped by a priest monthly, told it was sacred service. A man talks about his daughter who went to purification and came back broken, who died by her own hand 3 months later, who left a note saying she could not live with what they called blessing. Then the bishop says something that makes Julia's breath catch. Whatever was done to you was not your fault. You are not impure, you are not defiled. The ones who wielded power to inflict harm are the sinners. No ritual transforms rape into holiness. For the first time in 30 years, Julia speaks about what happened. The words come slowly, haltingly. She describes the wedding, the attendants, the descent, the chamber, the priest who said the goddess demanded her body, the veil that hid the evidence, the silence enforced by law. The room is silent when she finishes. Then other women begin nodding. Me too. And me. My sister. My daughter. My mother. The stories pour out. Decades of abuse, generations of victims, all hidden behind the word sacred, all protected by laws that make speaking a crime. The bishop listens to everything. When the testimonies end, he speaks with quiet fury. What Rome calls religion is organized abuse. What the priests call rights are violations. What the law protects is evil, and anyone who defends this system is complicit in it. This is radical, dangerous, potentially fatal. But Julia finds herself nodding, because it is true. Every word is true. And for the first time since that night, 30 years ago, someone is saying it out loud. She begins attending the gatherings regularly. She meets other survivors. She learns that this new faith has rules about sexuality that directly attack Roman practice. Your body belongs to you. Marriage intimacy requires mutual consent. Rape is always sin, regardless of who commits it or what divine authority they claim. These ideas are revolutionary. They undermine the entire structure of Roman religion. Temple prostitution is denounced as exploitation. Sacred rites are called crimes. The whole apparatus of priests and rituals and divine obligations is stripped of its protective language and revealed as a mechanism for harming the vulnerable. Rome responds with predictable violence. Christians are arrested for impietas. The same charge used to silence women about purification is now used against anyone who challenges the system. The punishment is identical: exile, property loss, death. But the Christians refuse to be silenced. They write letters. They preach in secret. They tell stories of martyrs who chose execution rather than participate in pagan rites. Some of these martyrs are young women ordered to serve in temples. They refuse, they are tortured, they die, and their deaths become testimony more powerful than any speech. Julia is too old to be a martyr. She is not brave enough anyway, but she can preserve what she knows. She tells her story to scribes who document testimonies. She describes the chamber, the names on walls, the system that processed hundreds of girls across centuries. She gives them her father's confession, retrieved from his tomb. She shows them the hidden fresco in her house. All of this evidence is collected, written down, passed among Christian communities. It will be suppressed when Rome tries to destroy the new faith. Much will be lost, but fragments will survive. Enough to prove that what the church later claims about pagan abuse is not exaggeration, not propaganda, but documented truth preserved by survivors who refuse to let their trauma be erased. Decades pass, the Christian movement grows despite persecution. It spreads through the empire like water finding cracks in stone. By the year 312, something unthinkable happens. An emperor converts. Constantine does not become Christian out of moral conviction. He becomes Christian because Christians make reliable political allies. They are organized, disciplined, loyal to their leaders. They represent a voting bloc he can use to consolidate power. So he converts, and suddenly the balance shifts. Pagan temples still stand. The old priesthoods still claim privileges. But now they must share power with bishops who despise everything those temples represent. The machinery of government begins turning against the system it once protected. Imperial edicts restrict pagan practices. First, sacrifices are limited, then certain festivals are banned, then funding is reduced. The process takes decades, but the direction is clear. Rome is abandoning the old gods. The question becomes, what happens to the structures built in their names? Julia does not live to see this. She dies in the year 40 at age 62. She is buried in a Christian cemetery with a marker that says Julia, faithful witness, who testified to truth when lies ruled. Her hidden fresco remains sealed in her house. Her carved message remains on chamber walls. Her story remains in documents scattered across the empire. 60 years after her death, the Emperor Theodosius issues a final order. All pagan worship is illegal. Temples will be closed. Priests will lose their authority. The cults that have ruled Rome for centuries are finished. The edict includes a specific clause written by bishops who listen to survivor testimonies. The practice called purification is henceforth recognized as violation and punished as criminal assault. Any priest who claims religious authority to touch unwilling bodies will face execution. It is explicit, direct, unambiguous. What Julia could not speak about under penalty of death, the law now declares to be crime. The Temple of Bona Dea is raided. Priests are arrested. The underground chambers are exposed. City officials descend and find the platforms, the drains, the iron restraints, and the walls covered with names, hundreds of names, centuries of testimony carved in stone. Public reaction is complex. Some Romans are horrified. They had no idea. They believed the purification was actually prayers and incense. Others refused to believe it. This must be Christian propaganda, an attack on traditional religion. The priests would never do such things, but the evidence is undeniable. The chambers exist, the names are real, cross-referenced with records, they match wedding dates perfectly. This was systematic, organized, protected by law, and it operated in plain sight for 500 years. The priests of Bona Dea face trial. Most are executed. Cassius, the high priest who presided during Julia's time, died decades earlier. But his successors face justice. He escaped. Their property is confiscated. Their names are struck from official records. The cult of Bona Dea is erased from Roman religion. Claudia dies by suicide before she can be arrested. She leaves a note. I thought I was surviving. I thought helping them was better than being destroyed by them. I was wrong. I became what hurt me. I have no defense. The chambers beneath the temples are repurposed. Some are filled with rubble to stabilize buildings above. Some become Christian crypts where martyrs are buried. The irony is savage. Bones of people who died resisting Rome's sacred violence now rest in spaces where that violence was committed. But some chambers are simply sealed, bricked over, hidden, forgotten. Which is why, in the year 2003, Dr. Catherine Johns breaks through a wall and finds Julia's name still carved in stone, still testifying, still witnessing what Rome tried to bury. The shift from pagan to Christian Rome did not end all abuse. Human beings carry their patterns with them. But it ended the legal protection for that specific system. It destroyed the framework that made purification mandatory. It gave women language to name what was done to them as crime rather than ritual. Christian writers spent centuries attacking pagan practices. They described temple rites as orgies. They claimed priests sacrificed children. They may have exaggerated some details, but beneath the propaganda lay hard truth. The fusion of religious authority and legal power had enabled horrors, and women like Julia had paid the price. The historical memory of purification blurred over time. Details faded. Legal language became obscure. The chambers were buried under later construction. But the outline survived as myth, as legend, as the folk belief that once upon a time powerful men claimed the right to take what they wanted from the vulnerable and called it sacred. In medieval Europe, stories spread about feudal lords claiming first-night rights over peasant brides. The law probably never existed in most places, but the fear was real because the pattern was familiar. Authority figures, sexual access, legal protection. The specifics change, but the structure remains recognizable across centuries. Modern excavations began reconnecting the pieces. Dr. Johns found the chamber with its names. Other archaeologists found similar sites beneath other temples. Legal historians found the statutes requiring purification. Classical scholars found the references in Plautus and Lucretius. Art historians found the Pompeii fresco with its hidden testimony. None of these alone prove everything, but together they form a picture. A 16-year-old girl walks downstairs because law defines her body as transaction price. A father stands frozen because resisting destroys his career. A priest locks the door and calls rape purification. A veil hides injuries so husbands do not ask questions. A law threatens death if anyone speaks. This is what happens when religion and power merge without accountability. When systems protect abusers instead of victims. When silence is enforced through law and speaking truth becomes crime. Today, tourists walk across the Aventine Hill where the Temple of Bona Dea once stood. They take photographs, they admire ruins. They listen to audio guides that describe the goddess who protected women. The guides do not mention the chambers beneath the marble, the platforms worn smooth from use, the drains cut for fluids, the names scratched by shaking hands. Most visitors will never know. They will see beautiful architecture and move on. But now you know, you have stood in the chamber with Julia. You have read the names on walls. You have seen how law and religion and power cooperated to transform violation into virtue. Julia died in the year 40 after the Common Era. She never saw the temples close. She never saw her testimony vindicated. She never saw justice for what was done to her and thousands of others. But her name outlasted the empire. Her frescoes survived volcanic ash. Her carved message endures beneath Rome. We were not offerings, we were taken. That is the truth no amount of sacred language can erase. That is the witness carved in stone and hidden in art and preserved in suppressed texts. That is what Julia left behind when silence was mandatory and speaking meant death. Anytime people with authority use divine words to justify harm, her story repeats. The details change. The religion shifts. The legal language adapts. But the pattern remains. Power demands. Victims suffer. Silence is enforced. Truth is buried. Until someone breaks the silence. Until someone carves the truth where lies cannot reach it. Until someone says out loud what everyone pretends not to know. Julia carved her truth in stone beneath a temple. 2,000 years later, archaeologists found it, read it, understood it, and suddenly the comfortable stories about Roman religion collapsed. The myth of benevolent goddess worship shattered. The reality of systematic abuse was exposed. Her silence was commanded by law. Ours is not. We can speak. We can name what she could only carve in darkness. We can say that rape is rape regardless of what authority claims to sanctify it. That victims are victims no matter what ritual terminology disguises their suffering. That systems built on abuse will eventually fall when enough people refuse to pretend they are sacred. This is not just about Rome. This is about the pattern, the way power operates when unchecked, the way religion can be weaponized against the vulnerable, the way silence protects predators while destroying victims. Julia's name is still on that wall beneath the Aventine Hill, still testifying, still bearing witness, still saying that what Rome called purification was theft, what priests called duty was crime, what law protected was evil. And she is still waiting, waiting for us to see the pattern when it appears in new forms, waiting for us to recognize the sacred language that justifies harm, waiting for us to break the silence that makes such systems possible. Her voice was taken, her body was used, her truth was suppressed, but the stone remembered. And memory once carved deeply enough outlasts empires.